with nothing but her body to offer. The rancher still risked his life to save the frozen Apache. The winter storm had come suddenly that evening. The sky over the wide prairie turned gray, and cold wind rushed across the empty land. Snow began to fall harder with every passing minute. The world around the small ranch slowly disappeared under a thick white blanket. Ethan Cole stood at the door of his wooden ranch house and looked across the land. He was a quiet rancher who lived alone for many years. His ranch sat far from towns and far from most people. The only sounds he often heard were the wind, the cattle, and the creaking of the old barn. Ethan pulled his heavy coat tighter around his body. The cold wind cut through the air like sharp knives. "Storm's getting worse," he said softly to himself. Normally, Ethan would stay inside during a storm like this, but he had learned long ago that winter storms could bring trouble for ranchers. Sometimes cattle wandered off. Sometimes fences broke. If he did not check the land, he might lose animals before morning. So Ethan stepped outside. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked toward the barn. The horses inside moved nervously, hearing the strong wind outside. Ethan checked the doors and made sure everything was secure. "Easy now," he said to the horses calmly. "You'll be fine." After checking the barn, Ethan climbed onto his horse, Ranger. Ranger was a strong brown horse who had been with Ethan for many years. The horse trusted him completely. "Just a quick ride," Ethan told the horse. They moved slowly across the ranch. Snowflakes hit Ethan's face as the wind grew stronger. The land around him looked empty and silent. Most people would never ride out in a storm like this. But Ethan was used to the lonely prairie. They had almost finished checking the fence line when something unusual caught Ethan's eye. At first, he thought it was just a pile of snow, but then Ranger suddenly stopped. The horse snorted and shifted its feet nervously. Ethan leaned forward and looked closer. There was something lying in the snow. "Easy, boy," Ethan whispered as he guided Ranger closer. The shape slowly became clearer through the falling snow. It was a person. Ethan's heart jumped with shock. He quickly climbed down from the horse and rushed toward the figure. Snow had already covered most of the body. Whoever it was had been lying there for some time. Ethan brushed the snow away with his gloves. A young Apache woman lay there, her clothes frozen and her face pale from the cold. Her dark hair was covered with ice and snow. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was weak and slow. Ethan felt a heavy feeling in his chest. "She won't last long out here," he said quietly. The wind howled louder around him. Snow kept falling harder. In weather like this, a person could freeze to death very quickly. Ethan looked around the empty prairie. There was no village nearby, no travelers, and no sign of anyone else. He knew one thing clearly. If he left her here, she would die. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Carrying someone through a storm like this was dangerous. The path back to the ranch was already hard to see. But Ethan had never been the kind of man who turned away from someone in trouble. He removed his thick coat and gently wrapped it around the woman to give her warmth. "Hang on," he said softly, even though she could not hear him. Lifting her was not easy. Her body was cold and stiff from a freezing wind. But Ethan carefully raised her and carried her toward Ranger. The horse shifted again, sensing the strange situation. "Steady, boy," Ethan said, with great effort. He helped the woman sit in front of the saddle while he climbed up behind her to keep her from falling. The snowstorm was now stronger than before. The wind pushed against them as if it wanted to stop them from moving. Ethan held the woman with one arm and the reins with the other. "Let's go home, Ranger." The horse began moving slowly through the snow. The ranch house was still far away, and the storm made every step harder. Ethan could barely see ahead of him. The woman's body felt freezing cold in his arms. "Stay with me," Ethan said quietly. He did not know who she was. He did not know why she had been out there alone in such terrible weather. But he knew one thing. Tonight, the storm had brought a stranger to his land, and Ethan Cole had already decided he would do everything he could to save her. Through the roaring wind and falling snow, the lone rancher and his horse slowly disappeared into the white storm, carrying the frozen stranger toward the small ranch house waiting in the distance. The storm outside continued through the night. Snow covered the land, the fences, and the open fields around Ethan Cole's ranch. The wind pushed hard against the wooden walls of the small ranch house. Inside, the fire in the stone fireplace burned brightly, filling the room with warm orange light. Ethan carefully laid the young Apache woman on a bed near the fire. Her clothes were still wet and cold from the snow. He knew she would not survive if she stayed frozen like that. He quickly brought thick blankets from a wooden chest and covered her. Then he placed another log into the fire. The flames grew stronger, warming the small room. Ethan stepped back and looked at her. Her face was still pale, but her breathing had become a little stronger. Ice slowly melted from her dark hair. The warmth of the room was beginning to help. "Come on now," Ethan said quietly. "You're safe here." He went to the kitchen corner and heated a small pot of water over the fire. Soon, steam rose from the pot. He poured the warm water into a cup and placed it on the table beside the bed. Hours passed. The storm continued outside, but inside the ranch house everything was calm and quiet. Ethan sat in a wooden chair near the bed, watching carefully. He had saved many animals during winter storms before, but this was different. This time, he had brought a stranger into his home. After some time, the woman slowly moved. Her fingers twitched under blankets. Ethan immediately stood up. "Easy now," he said softly. Her eyes slowly opened. At first, they looked confused, as if she did not know where she was. She looked around the room, seeing the fire, the wooden walls, and the man standing nearby. For a moment, fear crossed her face. Ethan raised his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said calmly. "You were out in the storm." The woman blinked several times, trying to understand. Her voice was weak when she finally spoke. "The storm?" "Yes," Ethan nodded. "I found you in the snow." She tried to sit up, but her body was still weak. Ethan gently helped her sit against the pillows. "You should rest," he said. "You were freezing." The woman looked at the thick coat wrapped around her shoulders. Then she looked at Ethan with quiet surprise. "You brought me here?" Ethan nodded again. "You would not have lasted long out there." For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes lowered, and she seemed thoughtful. "My name is Ayanna," she said quietly. "I'm Ethan Cole," he replied. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, the wind continued to howl across the prairie. Ayanna looked around the small ranch house. It was simple but warm. Wooden shelves held tools and books. A small table stood near the fire. "You saved my life," she said softly. Ethan shrugged slightly. Anyone would have done the same. But Ayanna slowly shook her head. "Not everyone." Her voice carried quiet honesty. For a moment, there was silence again. Ethan handed her the warm cup of water. "Drink slowly," he said. She held the cup with both hands, letting the warmth spread through her fingers. After a few sips, her color began to return. "You should sleep more," Ethan told her. "Your body needs time to recover." Ayanna looked at him again, as if studying him carefully. "You helped a stranger," she said, "even in the storm." Ethan leaned against a wooden wall. "The prairie can be hard on people," he replied. "No one should face it alone." Those words seemed to stay in Ayanna's mind. The wind outside slowly began to calm. Snow still fell, but the storm was losing its strength. Inside the ranch house, the fire continued to burn warmly. Ayanna rested back against the pillows, but she did not close her eyes yet. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "I must find my people." Ethan nodded. "We'll see how strong you are in the morning." He added another log to the fire. For the first time since the storm began, the ranch house felt less lonely. Two strangers now shared the quiet room, brought together by the harsh winter storm. And neither of them knew that the journey ahead would change both of their lives. Morning arrived slowly over the prairie. The storm had finally passed, but the land was still covered in deep snow. The sky was clear now, and the cold winter sun shone over the wide white fields. Inside the ranch house, the fire still burned softly. Ayanna slowly opened her eyes. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the storm, the snow, and the rancher who had saved her. She turned her head and saw Ethan near the window. He was looking outside at the snowy land. "You're awake," he said calmly. Ayanna sat up slowly. Her body was still weak, but she felt stronger than the night before. "Yes," she said, "I feel better today." Ethan nodded. That's good. He placed a small plate of warm food on the table. It was simple bread and some cooked beans, but it smelled good in the warm room. You should eat, he said. You need your strength. Ayanna thanked him quietly and began to eat. The warmth of the food helped her feel even better. After a few minutes, she looked toward the window. The storm is gone, she said. Yes, Ethan replied, but the snow will make travel slow. Ayanna was silent for a moment. My people were traveling south before the storm came, she explained. I became separated when the wind grew too strong. Ethan listened carefully. The prairie can be confusing during storms, he said. Tracks disappear quickly. Ayanna nodded. I must find them again. Ethan looked outside once more. The land stretched far in every direction. Snow covered everything. Finding a group of travelers in such a wide land would not be easy. He turned back toward her. You shouldn't travel alone yet, he said. Ayanna looked slightly surprised. You will help me? She asked. Ethan shrugged lightly. You're still recovering, he replied. Besides, I know this land better than most. For a moment, Ayanna simply looked at him with quiet appreciation. Thank you, she said softly. Soon they began preparing for the journey. Ethan saddled Ranger and another horse from the barn. He packed warm blankets, water, and food into small saddlebags. The cold air outside was sharp, but the sky remained bright and clear. Ayanna stepped outside the ranch house slowly. The sunlight reflected brightly off the snow. She looked across the peaceful prairie. It is beautiful, she said. Ethan followed her gaze. Yes, he said, but it can also be very dangerous. They mounted their horses and began riding slowly across the snow-covered land. The horses moved carefully, their hooves crunching through the frozen ground. For a long time, they rode in silence. The prairie was quiet now. The storm had left the world calm and still. As they traveled, Ethan watched the land carefully. He looked for broken branches, footprints, or any sign that travelers had passed nearby. After some time, Ayanna spoke. You have lived here long? She asked. Many years, Ethan answered. Alone? Ethan nodded. The ranch keeps me busy. Ayanna studied the peaceful land around them. It must feel very quiet. Ethan smiled slightly. Sometimes quiet is not a bad thing. They continued riding through small hills and open fields. Along the way, Ayanna pointed to certain signs in nature, bent grass, distant smoke marks, and bird movements. These were things Ethan had not noticed. You know this land well, too, Ethan said. Ayanna smiled gently. My people learned to read the land from childhood. Together, their knowledge helped guide them across the snowy prairie. Hours passed as the sun slowly moved across the sky. Finally, as they reached a small ridge, Ayanna suddenly raised her hand. Wait, she said. Ethan stopped his horse. What is it? Ayanna looked toward the distance. On the far side of the ridge, faint shapes moved slowly across the white land. Small figures, horses and people, her eyes filled with relief. My people, she said quietly. Ethan looked carefully and saw them too. A small traveling group was moving slowly across the prairie. Ayanna's face brightened with happiness. They survived the storm, she said. Ethan nodded. Looks like they did. They rode down the ridge toward the group. As they approached, several riders from the group noticed them and moved forward. At first they were cautious, but when they saw Ayanna, their faces showed clear joy. Ayanna spoke to them quickly in her language. The group welcomed her back warmly. Ethan stayed a short distance away, giving them space. After a few minutes, Ayanna turned her horse and rode back toward him. My family thanks you, she said. Ethan simply nodded. You're safe now, he replied. The winter sun began to lower toward the horizon, painting the snowy prairie with golden light. Both of them knew the journey that had brought them together was coming close to its end, but the memory of the storm and the kindness shown during it would not be forgotten. The evening sky slowly turned orange as the sun moved toward the horizon. The snow-covered prairie glowed softly under the warm light. Ayanna's people had stopped near a small group of trees to rest before continuing their journey. Horses stood quietly while smoke from a small fire rose into the cold air. Ethan remained near his horse, Ranger, watching from a short distance. He did not want to disturb the reunion between Ayanna and her people. They were speaking, smiling, and sharing warm greetings after the long storm. For Ayanna, it felt good to be home again. But her thoughts were not only with her people. After some time, she walked away from the group and approached Ethan. The snow crunched softly under her steps. "You helped me return safely," she said gently. Ethan looked toward the group and nodded. "You belong with them," he replied. "That's what matters." Ayanna looked at the peaceful prairie stretching around them. The cold wind had become soft now, and the sky was slowly growing darker. When the storm came, she said, "I thought I would not see my people again." Ethan listened quietly. "But you found me," she continued. Ethan shrugged slightly, as he often did when someone thanked him. "The storm brought you close to my ranch," he said. "Anyone would have helped." Ayanna smiled a little. "Maybe," she said, "but you did." For a moment, they both stood silently, watching the sunset over the wide prairie. Then Ayanna spoke again. "My family wishes to thank you properly. They would welcome you to sit with us by the fire tonight." Ethan looked toward the group. Some of the riders were already watching him with friendly expressions. He thought about it for a moment. "I appreciate the offer," he said kindly, "but my ranch is still many miles away. I should start back before night becomes too dark." Ayanna understood. The prairie at night could be difficult, especially in winter. She nodded slowly. "Then at least let me thank you before you leave." Ethan gave a small smile. "You already did." But Ayanna stepped closer and placed a hand over her heart in a traditional gesture of respect. "My people believe that kindness should always be remembered," she said. "You showed kindness when you did not have to." Ethan felt a quiet warmth hearing those words. The sky above them slowly turned deeper blue as evening arrived. "I'm glad you're safe," Ethan said simply. Ayanna looked toward the path leading back to his ranch. "You will return to your quiet ranch again," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "And you will still live alone?" Ethan looked across the open prairie. "Most likely," he said with a calm voice. Ayanna studied him for a moment, as if thinking carefully. "The prairie is wide," she said, "but sometimes people meet for a reason." Ethan gave a thoughtful smile, but did not answer right away. Finally, he climbed onto Ranger's saddle. "Well," he said, adjusting the reins, "you've got a long journey ahead with your people." Ayanna nodded. "And you have a long ride home." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan tipped his hat politely. "Take care, Ayanna." "And you, Ethan Cole," she replied. Ranger began to move slowly across the snow. Ethan guided the horse toward the open prairie, the direction of his distant ranch. Ayanna watched as he rode away. The last light of the setting sun stretched across the snow, creating long shadows over the land. Soon, Ethan became a small figure in the distance. But something inside him felt different now. For many years, Ethan Cole had believed the prairie was meant to be faced alone. Yet the storm had changed that thought. Sometimes, a single moment of kindness could connect two strangers in ways neither of them expected. Back at the camp, Ayanna finally turned and walked toward the fire where her people waited. They welcomed her warmly again. But before sitting down, she looked one last time toward the distant prairie. Somewhere far away, a lone rancher was riding home beneath the quiet winter sky. And though their paths were now different, both Ethan and Ayanna knew they would always remember the storm that had brought them together.